Istanbul reminds me of what Pakistan could have been. In Turkey, I imagine possibilities of a culture that I come from. Everybody is a member of Istanbul, of their culture, and want to have a say in the future of it. The biennial brings in a more sort of heightened discussions.
I'm curious about the small piece on the wall there.
The light box.
There's so much within the art world that happens by word of mouth, by engaging, by meeting people, by making a connection. Istanbul has always had to deal with an influx of people from other parts of Turkey. The population is on the rise. And so it's a very real problem. How can such a historical city accommodate everybody? I met Gülsün for the first time, but somehow there was a great sort of chemistry and connection with her. I'm very curious of that period of migration from rural to the city.
I was very much amazed by the flow of people from the countryside towards the cities in a very small time, in the end of 80s. So these are moving baskets, and they can be put together whenever you like. You can disperse them, you can just put them somewhere in a corner or so, and they're related to migration by having one basket with wheels and having those very colorful Turkish quilts inside them. A migrant, if he has a quilt like this, can survive anywhere. This is a textile collage which I sew with my hands, actually. And the material, as you can see, are from wall carpets. And all these materials are collected from the households of these newcomers to Istanbul. The ones who are coming from the rural areas, they come with their own culture. The city culture is always very rigid against this change. They do not want to integrate with it. But when it happens, the kitsch rises. The high and the low mixes together, and this hybridity becomes your life.
That's the first time that the city really has to deal with its transforming identity. Putting all of that in perspective, I think gave me a little bit more in-depth grasp of the city, and I felt connected to it.
Pretend to understand anything. We all know you don't, just like we don't.
Since the 2011 revolution in Egypt, a lot of people think it's more difficult to be there. But I feel like sometimes it's more difficult to be outside. I keep a studio in Cairo and I go back a lot for family reasons, but also for personal reasons when I feel like I need to be there for certain events. But at the same time, it's very important for me to not make a work about what's happening, because I don't have a clear understanding of what's been happening in the last few years.
You're talking about despair, but at the same time, you know, it's suspended because it's a discussion amongst tulips. It's very confident, the text is telling you something, but it doesn't give you an answer.
Exactly. The way I see the rules is that they're defeatist. Me saying 13 essential rules is very didactic, but I wanted to reduce that a bit by using a little bit of unexpected humor.
I really like in the exhibition put some rules, special rules for the people, like small humiliations that every day you feel. And I put the condition here that you have to remove shoes here and just walk with only one shoe inside of the space. I like to think the installation like a theatrical moment. The performers turn on the installation.
A lot of performances got harnessed by engaging local people and letting their impression, letting their emotional responses come into the piece.
I see a lot of pedestrians just walking into the space, and they're very curious. So we saw a lot of people.
Yes, I like this sensation when you create a weird space with the common objects, everyday objects that everybody knows.
So can you share some of the research that has entered this work?
For me, it was very interesting, this space, because it's very connected with the streets. I make a kind of clapping machine in a window shop to ask for money. The performances are very, very easy. Everybody can do it. Some people write too, on the walls or in some places. I like to think in the art space like a lab where you can do anything, but in the reality this is really impossible. There are too much rules in the code of the gallery space.
Istanbul Biennial has been sponsored in recent years by some of Turkey's biggest arms manufacturers.
As you can clearly see, this is my own video called Abstract.
Once money enters an art space, its links to other social fields obscured. So this tries to follow these links between this battlefield, which happens to be in the southeast of Turkey, and this specific art space. The bullets which were on the battlefield would directly link to manufacturers which would sponsor specific art spaces. This is very common. Of course, this runs through a chain of subsidiaries and so on, but the link is still very direct.
Militarization is really creeping up. It's very little.
Yes.
It's prevalent, it's huge.
Yeah. I don't know whether you've been around in the streets lately, but there's a lot of this paramilitary gear being deployed in the streets of Istanbul right now.
So this, for me, is very palpable in that respect, that it tells you that you can't escape it.
In the last 10 days that I was there, I felt much more of a energy and anxiousness that would erupt. It did a few times. You saw a whole protest live, and I walked right into it, and how it sort of spilled out into neighboring streets, etc. What was particularly interesting about this biennial was that there were many artists who had worked on projects which were going to be out in public spaces. They had to readjust their projects to exist inside. The project that was proposed by the Rietveld brothers, which was to take place in the Atatürk Cultural Center, was really kind of a victim of how the biennial had to readjust and morph itself to accommodate the protest.
The project is called Intensive Care. It was already made far before the riots. So we thought we should make a light installation which is kind of breathing, starting very slow and becoming more intensive in the end towards crisis.
It's such a shame
Yeah?
that
Yeah,
you know that
really
that it
Yeah,
was that you
have to
were unable
imagine
to.
the biennial team was really convinced about the proposal and it was ready to be executed.
The symbol of this particular building was very critical. Like you
of course.
chose this building.
Yeah, why this building? Because it's a Taksim Square. The freedom of speech on Taksim are continuously subject of debate.
It's like a monument of the secular state of Turkey.
Turkey has been doing really well economically, and you see that. The government had a plan to establish a mall in Gezi Park. Gezi Park is sort of right there in Taksim Square. That park is very meaningful to people. The initial protest was to not have the trees be cut down. There was a lot of graffiti, expression by young people in a variety of ways. One poet in particular, Nazim Hikmat, had a lot of quotations of his poems re-emerge. When I saw a lot of the graffiti referencing his poems, I definitely at that point chose that I would also use Nazim Hikmat's work in Pivot. Everybody who worked on the piece volunteered their time and ended up doing spontaneous performances for the piece itself. The poems were being sung. That text is the springboard for visualization. So I had this footage of walking in a red dress in a space which is like full of cypresses. When I was looking through images and photographs related to the protest, I found this very iconic image of an ordinary girl in a red dress being tear-gassed. So it made sense for me to bring that information back in this work. A lot of the young people found this sort of platform to really come together and realize their ability to get their voice heard. And that's a very powerful experience in general if you look at recent protests around the world. So I thought those things were very universal, not just what was the outcome of the protest, but the protest become like a catalyst for understanding your own ability to awaken and challenge and have that be a collective experience.
Osman!